Have you ever wondered why the people who irritate us the most often mirror the very things we can't face within ourselves? Carl Jung once wrote, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." Decades ago, he had no idea how uncannily these words would echo through the emotional battlefield between an empath and a narcissist. He couldn't have known that irritation would one day become the doorway, not to destruction, but to the most profound transformation a human being can ever undergo. You felt it, didn't you? That precise, electric instant when something deep inside you shifted, not shattered, but moved, like tectonic plates sliding silently beneath the surface after a storm. You're different now. And that difference unsettles the people who once thrived on your old energy. They see it in your gaze, a quiet strength that wasn't there before. Something within you has changed at its very core. You're no longer the person who would sacrifice every drop of your light just to keep others warm. You're no longer the one who confuses drowning with swimming just because you're used to surviving in emotional water. There's something nobody warns you about when you survive a narcissist. You don't simply recover, you evolve. You mutate into something psychology never accounted for. An empath who cannot be drained. A giver who finally knows where to draw the line. A healer who no longer bleeds for the wounds of others. And perhaps the most unsettling truth of all, you're becoming everything the narcissist feared. You're awakening. You're reclaiming sovereignty. You're becoming immune. Jung once hinted at a revelation so deep about human transformation that few psychologists dare to speak of it even today. The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. But here's the part he didn't say aloud. It's terrifying because your whole self includes powers you've been conditioned to fear. Powers that let you say no without guilt. Powers that let you feel another's pain without carrying it home. Powers that let you love without rescuing, to witness someone's fall without losing yourself in their descent. So, what if everything you were taught about empathy was never meant to empower you? What if it was designed, subtly, systematically, to keep you small, obedient, drained? What if your sensitivity isn't a fragile blessing or a cursed burden, but something far more dangerous? A technology of consciousness, hijacked before you ever learned how to use it. Stay with me, because what comes next might change the way you see yourself forever. What you're about to discover will turn upside down everything you thought you knew about who you become after narcissistic abuse. Let me tell you something deeply unsettling. By the time you were just 7 years old, you had already been unconsciously trained to become narcissistic supply. Not out of cruelty, but through a quiet, systematic conditioning that began long before you could name it. Every time you were praised for being so mature while comforting a stressed or weeping parent, the programming deepened. Each time you were called so understanding for staying silent when your own needs were overlooked, the code was reinforced. And when an adult told you, "You're so sensitive," with that strange mix of admiration and disapproval, it wasn't just an observation. It was the installation of software that would run silently in the background of your consciousness for decades. Think back to your childhood for a moment. Were you that child who sensed your mother's sadness before she even spoke? The one who learned to navigate your father's temper by becoming exactly what he needed you to be? Did you play family therapist at 10, mediator at 12, an emotional support system disguised as a child with homework and quiet eyes? That wasn't empathy in the healthy sense. That wasn't emotional intelligence. That was survival programming, written into your nervous system, line by line. And without realizing it, that training prepared you perfectly for the narcissist who would one day find you. The psychology is merciless in its clarity. Children who grow into empaths often share a haunting commonality. They were forced to become emotional translators for the adults who could not manage their own feelings. You learn to read micro-expressions as if your safety depended on it, because in truth, it did. Over time, you developed what researchers now describe as hypervigilance, disguised as intuition. You think you're intuitive, almost psychic, but you're actually traumatized. You believe you're naturally generous, but beneath that generosity lies a quiet terror of being abandoned. You call it love, yet much of it is a well-rehearsed performance scripted by other people's unhealed wounds. Here's the part that makes your stomach twist. Narcissists can spot an empath within minutes. They recognize the subtle signals, the way you lean forward when someone's upset, the way you unconsciously mirror another's emotions, that flicker of panic that flashes in your eyes when someone near you is unhappy. You're broadcasting your wounds at a frequency only predators can detect. And once they've found you, they begin to test you. Gently at first. A small boundary violation here, a cruel joke there. They watch how you rationalize it, how quickly you excuse their rudeness, how instinctively you apologize for things that aren't your fault. Within just a few conversations, they know exactly how to anchor their hooks into your empathy. But wait, it gets darker. The empathy you believe is your superpower isn't even fully yours. It was hijacked, reprogrammed, repurposed into something compulsive. Real empathy is a conscious choice. What you've been living is compulsive caretaking, dressed up to look like love. You can't stop absorbing the emotions of others because your nervous system is trapped in a trauma loop, whispering, "If I don't fix everyone, I'll be abandoned." This isn't sensitivity. It's a neurological cage. And the bars? They're made of other people's feelings, polished smooth from years of your touch. The physical toll of this kind of existence is staggering. Research shows that empaths caught in narcissistic relationships have cortisol levels comparable to soldiers in active combat. Your body is literally living in a war zone, battling in the invisible trenches of someone else's emotional battlefield. Your immune system falters, your thyroid slows, your adrenal glands burn until there's nothing left to give. You're not just emotionally drained, you're physiologically fighting for survival. You're biologically depleted. The narcissist isn't merely draining your energy. They're consuming your very life force, one subtle interaction at a time. It's not just emotional exhaustion, it's cellular erosion. Jung knew this long before modern psychology had words for it. He understood that we don't only interact psychologically, we also interact energetically, exchanging unseen currents that shape our mental and spiritual states. But here's the twist that no one warns you about. What if what irritates you most about narcissists isn't their arrogance or entitlement, but their freedom? Freedom from the very emotional prison you've been trapped in for years. They don't feel guilty. They don't sacrifice themselves to earn love. They don't apologize simply for existing. They take what they want without hesitation, without permission. They drift into sleep peacefully while you lie awake, replaying every conversation, dissecting every word, wondering if you said the right thing. And that, right there, is the paradox, because the qualities you despise in them are the fragments of yourself you've buried, the very ones you're now beginning to reclaim. You're not becoming a narcissist. You're becoming something infinitely more powerful, something Jung described as individuated. Jung called it the shadow, the hidden realm of our psyche, where we exile the parts of ourselves we're taught to fear, deny, or suppress. But here's what most people misunderstand. Your shadow isn't your darkness. It's your abandoned power. Every trait you judge in another person is a reflection of something within you that's been disowned, something waiting to return home. And the narcissist? They are simply the messenger, the one delivering a package you ordered long ago, the ticking emotional bomb of your own unintegrated self. They're the mirror showing you everything you refuse to see. Think about it. The narcissist does everything you don't allow yourself to do. They take up the space you shrink from. They demand what you're too afraid to ask for. They prioritize their needs while you delete your own. They express rage openly while you swallow yours until it curdles into depression. They are living your shadow, and that's precisely why you can't walk away. You're not addicted to the person. You're addicted to witnessing someone live without the invisible chains you've accepted as truth. You're captivated by their audacity, their shamelessness, their ease, even as it quietly destroys you. Here's the philosophical paradox. The narcissist isn't your opposite. They're your shadow teacher, the embodiment of everything you've disowned and everything you secretly long to integrate. Jung once said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." And that's exactly what this encounter forces you to do. The narcissist compels you to face your own darkness, not evil, but the dark feminine or masculine power you buried long ago. The part of you that knows how to receive without earning. The part that can rest without guilt. The part that can simply exist without justification or apology. The energy exchange between empath and narcissist exposes a shocking truth. You're not actually an empath being drained. You're a powerful being who was taught to leak energy, meeting someone who was taught to steal it. Two trauma responses dancing in a loop, each reflecting the other. But only one of you holds the real power, and it's not who you've been led to believe. The narcissist needs supply. You generate it. They're the addict, and you're the drug. But years of conditioning have made you see it backwards. And here's the disturbing scientific fact. Brain scans reveal that empaths in relationships with narcissists develop neural patterns eerily similar to victims of Stockholm Syndrome. Your brain literally rewires itself to survive the bond, to love what's hurting you. The same regions of the brain that ignite during addiction light up the moment you think of them. You're not merely emotionally attached. You're neurologically hijacked. Your nervous system recognizes their name, the way a body remembers a drug. But here's what no scientific study has yet captured. What happens to that rewired brain when it finally breaks free? What does freedom actually feel like after the bond shatters? You want to know? You become something extraordinary, psychologically ambidextrous. You learn to feel deeply and think clearly at the same time. To connect intimately while still maintaining your sovereignty. To love fully and, when necessary, to leave quickly. Paradox becomes your new language. The narcissist, without meaning to, trained you to hold it. They forced you to develop capacities most people never need. The ability to love someone while seeing through them, to feel compassion without collapsing into it, to understand someone completely while refusing to enable their destruction. But the transformation that's coming next will challenge everything you think you know about healing. This is where conventional therapy often fails you, because it tries to guide you backward to the version of yourself you were before the damage. Jung saw deeper than that. He called it individuation. It's not about healing back. It's about evolving forward into someone who has never existed before. You're not trying to recover your old self. That person, as painful as it is to admit, was food. You are birthing a new self, one that cannot be consumed, one that knows its worth on a cellular level. The transformed empath doesn't lose their sensitivity. They refine it, sharpen it, transform it into a tool. Not a weapon against others, but a weapon for themselves. Every emotion becomes intelligence. Every feeling becomes data. Every shift in energy becomes valuable information. You're not shutting down. You're becoming consciously selective. There's a world of difference. You still feel everything, but you no longer become everything you feel. That's the shift that terrifies people who once depended on your constant availability. Watch what happens when you begin to change. The panic is immediate. Family members who once fed on your kindness now whisper that you've grown cold. Friends who used you as their emotional landfill accuse you of changing. Colleagues who thrived on your endless helpfulness suddenly call you difficult. But here's the truth. The entire ecosystem built on your self-abandonment begins to crumble. And that collapse is proof that you're healing. Good. Their panic is your progress meter. Their discomfort is your compass, pointing toward freedom. Here's the simple practice that changes everything. When you feel someone's emotion, pause and ask yourself, is this mine to carry? When someone shares their pain, ask, did they ask for help or do they just want to unload? When guilt rises like a tide, ask, is this guilt mine or just old programming? When you catch yourself feeling responsible for another person's happiness, whisper, am I their parent or their equal? It's within those pauses that your true power is born, because in the quiet space between stimulus and response, in that sacred breath of awareness, you're becoming what Jung called conscious. Not nice, not mean, simply conscious, awake, sovereign, present to what is, rather than lost in what others need you to be. It's a strange kind of freedom, grounded, calm, and utterly unfamiliar. But here's the cliffhanger. The moment you begin this practice of awareness, something entirely unexpected happens. The narcissists in your life, both past and present, start to reveal themselves in ways that will leave you breathless. Because once you stop supplying them, they start exposing themselves. And what they expose will disturb you even more than their abuse ever did. You begin to see the machinery behind the mask, the gears turning beneath their charm. You start to understand the game you've unknowingly been playing all along. And in that revelation, one truth will hit you harder than anything else. You were never the weak one. You were simply unaware of your strength. Here's the most disturbing discovery about empaths who survive narcissistic abuse. They develop what psychologists quietly refer to as dark empath traits. Not evil, not cruel. Dark, as in shadow integrated. You gain a kind of X-ray vision into human behavior. You can feel someone's emotions and remain entirely unaffected. You can sense manipulation in its earliest, almost invisible stages. You can spot a narcissist in under 30 seconds. That peculiar blend of charm and hollowness, that intoxicating yet uneasy energy that feels less like attention and more like hunger. You've become psychologically dangerous, not because you would harm anyone, but because you can no longer be harmed in the same ways. You've evolved psychological antibodies. You're immune to guilt trips, resistant to emotional manipulation, allergic to one-sided relationships. You've become what the narcissist only pretends to be, truly self-sufficient. The progression of this transformation is fascinating, almost alchemical. At first, you'll feel guilty for setting boundaries. That's just your old programming trying to reassert itself. Then comes anger, raw and righteous, at everyone who violated those boundaries. That's your power returning to its rightful owner. Next comes grief, mourning the version of you who tolerated it all. That's you letting go. And finally, you'll feel nothing. But don't mistake it for numbness. It's clarity. The clean, sacred indifference of someone who finally sees the entire board, who understands the game and has chosen to stop playing. That's the peace of true sovereignty. The quiet confidence of someone who no longer needs to prove, please, or perform. Here's your new repertoire, the language of freedom. That sounds difficult, spoken without offering to fix it. I need to think about that. Buying time to find your authentic response. That doesn't work for me. No justification required. No. A complete sentence. I've decided. No committee vote needed. That's not my responsibility. The most powerful spell against manipulation ever discovered. Watch carefully how these simple phrases strike fear into the hearts of those who depend on your compliance. But the real test comes when someone you love uses tears, anger, or guilt to pull you back into the old pattern. And instead of feeling responsible, you feel curious. That's when you'll know the transformation is complete. You're observing the manipulation like a scientist, not experiencing it like a victim. You see the strings now, not just the puppet show. Jung foresaw this moment when he wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But what he didn't mention is the cost of that privilege. Everyone who benefited from who you used to be will resist who you're becoming. It's inevitable. They'll call your boundaries walls. They'll label your standards selfish. They'll say your peace feels like coldness. The very people who once applauded your kindness will now mourn your distance, grieving the version of you that served them while trying to guilt the new you back into existence. But this is what you become when you evolve beyond their reach. A sovereign empath. Someone who feels everything, but is controlled by nothing. You're not cold, you're precise. Not cruel, simply clear. Not selfish, self-possessed. You've finally stopped confusing self-abandonment with love. You've stopped mistaking suffering for depth. You've stopped believing that pain is a requirement for meaning or connection. And when that shift happens, your relationships transform almost overnight. The energy vampires who once latched onto you can no longer find a way in. It's as if the current inside your spirit has changed. They're trying to plug into a socket that no longer conducts their frequency. Narcissists begin to lose interest because you no longer provide the fuel that feeds them. Toxic family members might say you've changed or that you're lost. simply because you're no longer waiting where they left you. But here's the beautiful irony. None of it bothers you anymore. Their opinions have lost their power. They're no longer instructions. They're just data. Information you can observe without attachment. And notice something miraculous. The people who remain are the ones who truly matter. The reciprocators, the genuine souls, the ones who respect your boundaries instead of testing them. The ones who arrive with their own happiness instead of demanding yours to survive. Your circle shrinks, dramatically, even painfully, but the quality of connection soars. You trade 100 shallow interactions for a handful of profound relationships. You move from endless chaos to real peace, from constant fixin' to mutual growth, from emotional depletion to shared expansion. Here's the philosophical truth bomb most people never grasp. You haven't merely healed from narcissistic abuse. You've evolved because of it. Not in spite of it, but precisely because of it. The narcissist was never just a curse. They were a catalyst, not an ending, but a doorway. They forced you to confront the parts of yourself you had buried. They showed you your shadow. And now, instead of hiding from it, you've learned to dance with it. They revealed your programming, and now you're rewriting the code. They exposed your wounds, and now you're alchemizing that pain into wisdom, turning suffering into strategy, confusion into clarity. This is the ultimate paradox Jung spoke of. You become both softer and stronger, more empathic yet more boundaried, more loving yet more discerning. You learn to hold opposites without tearing yourself apart. You've become psychologically integrated, the rarest form of human being. Someone who can feel without merging, love without losing themselves, give without emptying, connect without vanishing. This isn't recovery, it's metamorphosis. You're not returning to who you were. That person was food. You're becoming who you were always meant to be. Someone who can feed themselves. Someone whose empathy no longer costs them their soul. Because the empath who emerges from narcissistic abuse isn't damaged goods. They are dangerous goods. Dangerous to anyone who depends on their compliance, their energy, or their silent participation in dysfunction. You know what the narcissist's greatest fear was? This moment. You, right here, watching this, understanding this, becoming this. They always knew, deep down, that if you ever woke up to your own power, their entire game would collapse. Their control depended on your confusion. Their dominance required your doubt. But now, guess what? Game over. Your sensitivity isn't your weakness. It's your radar, finely tuned to truth. Your empathy isn't your burden. It's your intelligence, your emotional sonar cutting through the noise. And your intuition? That isn't anxiety. It's ancient wisdom finally being heard after years of being silenced. You were never too much. You were simply surrounded by people who couldn't handle your magnitude, people who mistook your depth for danger. They told you to tone it down, to shrink, to make yourself smaller so they could feel bigger. But you were never meant to fit inside their fragile framework. You were meant to break it. If this message reaches you in places you didn't even know existed, if something inside you stirs, if you feel your entire paradigm tilting, if you recognize your reflection in these words, then understand this. You are not alone. You are part of something vast, something global, something ancient reawakening in modern form. You are part of a massive awakening of empaths who are done being food. done being drained, dismissed, or devoured. So, subscribe to this movement, not because I need your subscription, but because you need the reminder. Every single day, you are becoming more powerful. Every boundary you set makes you more sovereign. Every no you speak makes you more free. Hit that subscribe button as if you're declaring your independence from every narcissist who ever tried to dim your light, from every manipulator who mistook your kindness for weakness. Let that click be your signature on a new contract with yourself, and don't keep this transformation to yourself. Share it with every empath you know who's still in the dark, still doubting their strength. Comment below with the exact moment you knew, really knew, that you'd never be the same again. Because your transformation isn't just personal, it's prophetic. When an empath fully awakens to their own power, they don't just change themselves, they shift the entire energetic field around them. They rewrite the emotional code of every room they enter. And that terrifies those who depend on the old world order, the ones who thrive on chaos, control, and compliance. Welcome to your evolution. Welcome to your shadow integration. Welcome to the other side of narcissistic abuse, where survival is only the beginning and awakening feels almost supernatural. The empath you once were died in that relationship. What's standing in your place now is something entirely new. Something Jung himself would call individuated. Something the narcissist would whisper about as dangerous. Something you can finally call free.